I still remember the moment she walked out. The front door slammed behind her and I heard the click of her car fading down the street. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking, staring at the empty coffee cup she left behind. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air, and for a second I couldn't breathe. She didn't even glance back, just her perfume lingering, the sound of her heels fading, and the truth hitting me like a punch. She left me for him, for the guy with the bigger house, fancier car, easier life. I sank into the chair, feeling every knot in my shoulders tighten. I tasted the bitterness of coffee that suddenly seemed like sand in my mouth. I could hear the neighbors moving on with their lives, laughing outside, the world carrying on while mine had just collapsed. And then, for the first time in weeks, I felt it. Anger, sharp and hot, mixing with this gnawing determination. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made a choice right there, sitting in the ruins of my life. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for someone who chose money over me. I was going to rise, quietly, in a way that would leave everyone, including her, stunned. That night I packed a small bag, grabbed the notebook I always carried for ideas, and stepped out into the cool night air. The streets smelled like rain and asphalt, and I breathed it in, letting it fill me with a strange, fierce clarity. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I spent the next morning in a daze, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked older, wearier, like the life I thought I had was peeling away in real time. My eyes were bloodshot, my jaw tight. I thought about calling her, leaving some desperate, pathetic message, but I didn't. I crushed the phone in my hand for a second, feeling the power in the act of not reaching out. That's when it hit me. I had to rebuild. Not for her, not to prove her wrong, but for me. I went to my small garage, the one place in the house I hadn't let decay. Tools hung crookedly on the walls, scraps of wood piled in corners. I'd always been handy, always good with my hands, and for the first time, I realized that skill was going to be my lifeline. I started sketching a plan in my notebook, ideas flowing like electricity, custom furniture, high-end refurbishing, projects that could make people stop and stare. My hands shook as I wrote, but there was fire in me I hadn't felt in years. Days blurred together, sweat soaked through my shirts. The smell of sawdust, varnish, and oil became my new perfume. My neighbors would see me at odd hours, working under the harsh glow of garage lights, and they'd whisper, "He's crazy. Who works this hard alone?" I didn't care. Every cut of wood, every coat of stain was a strike against the emptiness she'd left behind. Every splinter was a tiny victory. Then came the first big break. I posted a picture of a hand-carved table online, just on a whim, expecting maybe a few likes. Within hours, people were calling, asking if I could make custom pieces. The orders started piling up, small at first, then bigger, more complex. I was no longer invisible. I felt it in my chest, a mixture of pride and vindication. I wasn't rich, I wasn't flashy, but I was alive, building something that no one could take away from me. And the moment that burned brightest, seeing her on social media. She'd posted a photo of herself in his mansion, champagne in hand, smiling at the life she'd chosen. I stared at it for a long time. My heart thumped, not with hurt, but with this strange, intoxicating confidence. I didn't need to compete with him. I just needed to win in my own way, and everyone was about to notice. By the time week 3 rolled around, I was running on adrenaline and sawdust. My small garage had transformed into a workshop of controlled chaos. Plywood stacked in corners, saws humming, and the air thick with varnish and determination. The smell of oil and wood shavings became my constant companion, like a badge of honor. Every morning I woke up before dawn, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, already thinking about the next project, the next piece that would outshine anything her new life could ever offer. I started getting calls from local boutiques and restaurants. They wanted tables, chairs, shelving, anything that could give their space a unique character. One call in particular stuck with me. A high-end cafe downtown wanted a set of handcrafted tables and bar stools, no compromises. The budget was tight, but the recognition would be huge. I accepted without hesitation. As I sketched the designs, I imagined her seeing them someday, imagining that I'd somehow managed to rise without her. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need her validation to succeed. Sleep became a luxury I didn't allow myself. My hands were raw, calloused, and smeared with layers of paint, yet every scar was a symbol of my progress. Nights smelled of varnish, of sawdust, of coffee, and determination. The sound of my saw cutting through oak was music to me. Sharp, satisfying, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And every completed piece, every finished table or chair, made me feel stronger. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt that had followed me my whole life, fading into the background as my confidence grew louder. Then came the day she showed up. I didn't expect it. I was outside, sanding the edges of a custom bar, sweat pouring down my face, when I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up. There she was, stepping out of a sleek black SUV, designer bag in hand, perfectly coiffed hair shining in the sunlight. She froze when she saw me, as if suddenly realizing that the man she'd left behind had become unrecognizable. Not in appearance, exactly. My beard was still trimmed, my shirt dust-streaked, but in presence, I was calm, focused, unshakable. She had left thinking she'd broken me, but what she saw was someone who had risen from the ashes while she sipped champagne in her gilded cage. She lingered at the edge of my property, watching me work. I didn't approach, didn't call her over. I just kept sanding, kept building, and in that moment I felt a shift, not just in her, but in myself. I realized I didn't need her acknowledgement to feel victorious. I was winning silently, one piece at a time, one precise stroke at a time. And she could see it. Everyone could. By the evening I had finished the bar, smooth and flawless, each curve deliberate, each joint perfect. I stood back, wiping sweat from my brow, feeling the heat of the sun on my skin, the satisfaction of creation deep in my chest. My phone buzzed, messages from clients, orders coming in faster than I could manage. And somewhere deep in the background, I could almost hear her retreating steps, fading into the distance. She had come to see if I'd fallen apart, and instead, she'd witnessed the beginning of something unstoppable. Business was booming faster than I ever imagined. Orders were stacking up, emails pinging on my phone day and night, and my garage had officially become a workshop that smelled like ambition and sawdust. I was in a rhythm now: cut, sand, stain, assemble, repeat. But the thrill wasn't just in the work. It was in knowing I had built this without anyone's help, without shortcuts, without compromising who I was. Every piece I finished carried a piece of me, a silent declaration that I was more than what she had left behind. One Saturday morning, I got an unexpected knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most of my clients communicated online or through calls, but when I opened it, there she was. Again. Different outfit, different car, same arrogant confidence that had always annoyed me. She stepped onto the gravel, her heels clicking sharply, and I could smell the expensive perfume she had always favored. "Hey," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes flickered just for a second. Shock, maybe? Or maybe curiosity. "I saw your projects online. They're impressive." I didn't answer right away. I just wiped my hands on my rag and studied her like she had never really mattered. That silence was heavy, and I could see it unnerving her. For a long moment it was just us, me standing tall, steady, her shifting on her feet. Then I finally spoke. "Thanks. They sell." That was all. No bitterness, no gloating, just truth. And somehow that cut deeper than any words could have. She hesitated, her carefully curated smile faltering. She had come to see if I was broken, and instead she saw a man transformed, unbending, thriving. I didn't need to prove anything. The success, the orders, the buzz in town, they spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. After she left, something inside me changed. I felt a surge of clarity, like a storm had passed, and the sky was suddenly sharp and clean. I realized that I wasn't building just for me. I was building a legacy. Not just furniture, not just a business, but a life so full and precise that no one could ever diminish it. The smell of sawdust was no longer just labor. It was freedom. The hum of the saw was no longer just work. It was music, a soundtrack to my victory. Weeks turned into months. The cafe project went live, and it was a hit. People came from all over town to see my work, snapping photos, sharing stories, and praising the craftsmanship. I walked through the space one evening, the scent of varnished wood heavy in the air, and felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with her. I had done this on my own, and it was beautiful. Every curve of the tables, every polished surface, reflected not just skill, but perseverance, and every obstacle I had overcome. Then came the local awards night. My name was announced for Best Emerging Artisan, and the applause hit me like a tidal wave. Cameras flashed, people shook my hand, asked questions, complimented the pieces I had poured my soul into. And I thought about her somewhere, watching from a screen, realizing that the man she had underestimated had quietly, powerfully, taken his place in the world. I didn't need to say a word. The victory was mine, and it was louder than any argument, any fight, any heartbreak ever could have been. As I left the stage, holding the small plaque, the smell of polish and sweat still lingering on my hands, I realized I had reached a point I never thought I would. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, and every piece I touched, every order I filled, was proof that leaving me had never been her win. Life had settled into a rhythm, but it wasn't calm. It was electric. Every day brought new clients, new commissions, new challenges that pushed me harder than I had ever been pushed before. My hands were permanently stained with varnish and paint, my back sore, my lungs filled with sawdust. And yet, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Every order I completed, every compliment I received, was a small hammer strike shaping the man I had become. One morning, I got a call that made my stomach twist. It was from her. I didn't answer right away. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I thought about all the nights I had spent imagining this moment. When I finally picked up, her voice was tight, controlled, almost hesitant. I saw your latest work at the gallery," she said. "It's incredible. Everyone's talking about it. You've really built something." I let a beat pass before answering. "Thanks. I've been busy." She hesitated again, and I could almost hear the unsaid questions hanging in the air. She wanted to know if I was hurt, if I had missed her, if I had fallen apart. The truth was, none of that mattered anymore. I had moved beyond needing her approval. My success, my life, my independence. That was the answer she didn't expect, and maybe the one she couldn't face. I hung up feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. That call wasn't about reconciliation. It was a silent acknowledgement that I had won in the only way that mattered. I wasn't flaunting it. I wasn't bitter. I was simply untouchable in my own world. The next few weeks, business continued to explode. Orders were coming from out of state, commissions for restaurants, homes, even a boutique hotel downtown. I worked late into the night, the smell of sawdust, oil, and varnish filling my lungs. I had music playing softly in the background, the rhythmic hum of my tools blending with it like a heartbeat. I felt untouchable, unstoppable, and more alive than I had ever been. And then, one rainy afternoon, it happened. I was delivering a custom table to a new client downtown when I saw him, the man she had left me for. He was stepping out of his luxury car, a watch glinting on his wrist, a smug smile on his face. He didn't notice me at first, and I didn't make a move. I let him believe I was the same man he had underestimated. But when he caught sight of the furniture I had crafted, his expression shifted. Curiosity first, then confusion, and finally, something like fear. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I think he realized that the life he had bought with money meant nothing compared to the life I had built with my own hands, sweat, and determination. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The proof was in front of him. My work, my focus, my success. And as I carried the table into the client's apartment, the rain soaking my clothes, the scent of wet asphalt mixing with wood polish, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and I had come out stronger, richer in ways money could never buy. By the time the summer rolled in, I had become a fixture in my neighborhood, the man who had risen from heartbreak to create something tangible, respected, and undeniable. The smell of varnish was like a signature, a subtle reminder of the hours I had poured into every surface, every curve, every joint. My garage, once a cluttered, half-forgotten corner, was now a shrine to determination, light spilling through the high windows onto the polished floors, and rows of half-finished projects. One evening, I was working late on a commission for a new upscale restaurant. The hum of my sander was steady, comforting, blending with the faint sound of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. Sweat dripped down my face, mingling with the sawdust that clung to my skin. I didn't hear her arrive. "She's here," a voice said quietly behind me. It was the delivery guy. I froze, my hands stilling on the wood, the sharp scent of fresh varnish suddenly stronger. I turned, and there she was, standing at the edge of the garage, rainwater dripping from her hair onto the concrete floor. This time, there was no designer outfit, no air of superiority, just her, soaked, vulnerable, looking at me with something I hadn't seen before: hesitation. I didn't know you were still doing this," she said. Her voice wavered. "All of this, it's impressive." I didn't step forward. I didn't soften my tone. I let her see the man she had underestimated, the man who had taken every piece of heartbreak and transformed it into something tangible, beautiful, unstoppable. "Thanks," I said simply, my voice steady, calm. "It's work I care about." She swallowed, shifting on her feet. The confidence she had always carried was gone, replaced with something raw, human. For a second I wondered if she even recognized me. Not my face, but the presence I carried now. I was larger than heartbreak, larger than betrayal. My life wasn't defined by her choices anymore. It was defined by every drop of sweat, every splintered finger, every night I stayed up building my future. "You've changed," she said softly, almost reverently. I nodded, letting the silence fill the space between us. Outside, rain drummed softly against the garage roof, the earthy scent rising from the wet asphalt. The workshop smelled of wood, varnish, and triumph. I realized then that her words didn't matter. My life, my success, my quiet victories, they were enough. They always had been. The moment passed. She lingered a beat longer, then turned and left, leaving me in the hum of the workshop, the scent of sawdust heavy in my lungs. And I smiled, not out of spite, not out of triumph over her, but because I finally understood something I had only suspected before. I was free. Free from her, free from doubt, free from the need for validation. The life I had built, every polished surface, every carved edge, was mine, and it was perfect. That night, I stayed in the workshop long after the rain stopped, the smell of wet wood and varnish mixing with the night air. I ran my hands over the table I had been working on, feeling the smoothness under my fingers, listening to the faint creak of the joints settling. I realized I had created more than furniture. I had created proof that a man could rise from betrayal and heartbreak, not by fighting the past, but by building a future only he could define. And in that quiet, rain-scented night, I finally understood. No one could ever leave me behind again. Weeks passed, and the momentum of my life didn't slow. Orders kept piling in, each one a reminder that I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. The garage hummed with the rhythm of saws, hammers, and sanders, the scent of wood shavings and varnish filling every corner. I rarely left, except to deliver pieces, meet clients, or grab coffee from the small cafe that had become my favorite spot. Life was busy, loud, and alive, and I loved every second of it. Then came the invitation I hadn't expected. The local business association, the same one that hosted awards and networking events downtown, had invited me to speak at their summer gathering. At first I laughed. Me? Speak in front of a crowd of executives, designers, and entrepreneurs? But as I considered it, I realized this was more than a speaking opportunity. It was a chance to cement the life I had built, to show, without words, that I had risen from the ashes. The night of the event, I wore a simple suit, tailored but understated. No flash, no show, just confidence. The scent of polished leather shoes mingled with the faint aroma of cologne, but it was the quiet power in my stance that commanded attention. People whispered when I walked in, some familiar faces from previous commissions, others simply curious. I could feel the energy shift the moment I entered. I was halfway through my speech, talking about discipline, focus, and the art of creation, when I saw them, she and him standing together near the back, trying to appear casual but failing. Their eyes found me, and I caught that flicker again. Recognition, hesitation, maybe even regret. I spoke, my voice steady, deliberate, each word carrying weight. I started with a garage, a handful of tools and a vision, I said, letting the words hang in the air. I faced doubt, betrayal, and nights where giving up felt easier. But I didn't quit. I built something that mattered, not for anyone else, not to prove anyone wrong, but for me. I could feel her shifting, her shoulders tightening, and even him glanced away, uncomfortable. The applause at the end of my speech wasn't just polite, it was genuine, earned, undeniable. The scent of polished wood and fresh paint from the pieces I'd brought filled the room, mingling with the subtle hum of admiration. I walked off the stage with my head high, every step a declaration. I had arrived. Later that night, outside under the warm glow of streetlights, I saw her again. She didn't say anything this time. She just watched as I loaded the last piece into my truck, rain from an earlier drizzle still glistening on the asphalt, and I understood something in that quiet moment. She had witnessed my transformation, but it was irrelevant. I didn't need her approval, her notice, or her recognition. I had won, not through confrontation, but through relentless dedication to my own path. Driving home, the smell of wet asphalt and varnish lingering in the cab, I smiled. The world had shifted, subtly but irrevocably. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and I had emerged stronger, taller, and more alive than ever before. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly unstoppable. The weeks after the Business Association event were some of the most intense of my life, but in a way that was exhilarating rather than exhausting. I woke each morning with the smell of fresh coffee and sawdust in my lungs, the sun spilling through the tall garage windows and glinting off half-finished pieces of wood. My hands were rougher now, my muscles tighter and leaner from endless hours of labor, but I had never felt more alive. Each project I touched seemed infused with a piece of me, a silent testament to what I had endured, survived, and ultimately transformed into something tangible and beautiful. I had orders from all over town now, and even a few from neighboring cities. Restaurants, boutiques, and private homes sought my work, not just the quality of it, but the story behind it. People wanted furniture that had character, that carried soul. And I realized the irony. Heartbreak, betrayal, and being underestimated had given me the drive to create something extraordinary. I didn't need anyone's sympathy or recognition, but people wanted the story. They wanted to see the man who had built something magnificent out of loss. One humid afternoon, as I was finishing a custom set of chairs, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it and saw a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered. "Hi, is this Marcus Taylor?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes," I said cautiously, wiping sweat and sawdust from my brow. "This is Samuel Green. I own Green Interiors downtown. I saw your work at the Business Association event. I want you to do the furniture for my new hotel project. I'm talking about the entire lobby, all the suites, even the restaurant." I felt a jolt in my chest. The voice was professional, confident, but it carried weight. This was not a small commission. I leaned against the workbench, taking in the smell of varnish, the faint metallic tang of screws and nails. I could hear the rhythmic hum of my sander in the background, steady and grounding. I'd be honored," I said after a moment, trying to keep my excitement contained. The project would take months, maybe even close to a year. It was a huge undertaking, but I was ready. I worked out a plan, scheduling deliveries, acquiring premium wood, hiring 2 skilled assistants I had trusted and mentored. My garage, once a small, cluttered space, was now a full-blown workshop. I could feel the vibration of progress in the floors, smell the mixture of sawdust, varnish, and oil in the air, and hear the soft, satisfying creak of the wooden joints I meticulously assembled. Every detail mattered, from the grain of the wood to the final polish on each table and chair. Late one night, after hours of sanding and staining, I stepped outside for a break. The streets smelled of wet asphalt from a sudden rain shower, the night air heavy with humidity. I lit a cigarette and took a long drag, watching the mist curl around the streetlights. My mind wandered to her, the woman who had left me for the promise of a richer life. I imagined her in that mansion, surrounded by luxury she hadn't built, her life carefully curated but hollow. And I smiled, not out of malice, but because I knew the truth. I had something she could never buy. I had purpose. I had resilience. I had built a life that no betrayal could take from me. Weeks turned into months, and the hotel project consumed me. I oversaw every detail personally, from the selection of exotic woods to the stitching on custom leather chairs. My assistants joked that I had become obsessive, but I didn't care. I felt alive in a way I never had before, driven not by revenge, but by the sheer joy of creation and the satisfaction of proving, to myself, that I could rise above anything. One evening, after delivering a set of hand-carved tables to a private client, I returned to my garage and found her waiting. She stood at the edge of the driveway, rainwater dripping from her hair onto the asphalt. This time, there was no pretense, no carefully crafted elegance. She looked human, vulnerable, curious, hesitant. I saw the hotel project, she said, voice soft. The furniture, it's incredible. You've changed. I didn't step toward her. I didn't soften my tone. I let her see the man she had left behind, the man who had taken heartbreak and forged it into something stronger, something undeniable. Thanks, I said simply. It's work I care about. Her eyes lingered on me, and I could see the recognition, the hesitation, the faintest trace of regret. She had come to check if I was broken, to see if I had fallen apart, but all she saw was a man thriving, unshakable, unstoppable. I didn't need her acknowledgement. My life, my work, my success, they were more than enough. She lingered a moment longer, then turned and walked away. I watched her go, the faint scent of her perfume fading into the night, mingling with the aroma of wet asphalt and wood polish. And for the first time, I realized something profound. I didn't need her in my life to feel complete. I didn't need anyone's validation to recognize my worth. The life I had built, the projects I had completed, the legacy I was creating, they were mine, and they were perfect. I returned to the garage, the hum of the sander and the scent of fresh varnish filling the space. I ran my hands over the new pieces I had finished, feeling the smoothness of the wood beneath my fingers. Every curve, every joint, every polished surface was proof that I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and emerged stronger, taller, and more alive than ever before. And in that quiet, rain-scented night, surrounded by the tangible results of my perseverance, I finally understood something I had only suspected before. No one could ever leave me behind again. I had built a life that belonged to me, a life so solid, so undeniable, that it could never be shaken. And in that truth, I found a peace deeper than any apology, deeper than any reconciliation, deeper than any success could ever offer. By the time the hotel project was halfway complete, I had fully settled into a rhythm that was almost meditative. The garage had become my sanctuary, a place where every smell, sound, and texture carried meaning. Sawdust hung in the air like mist, the faint tang of varnish lingering in every corner. The hum of sanders and the rhythmic tap of hammers were more than background noise. They were a kind of music, a heartbeat that synchronized with mine. I woke before sunrise every day, the cool morning air sharp against my skin, coffee in one hand, my notebook of sketches in the other, ready to tackle whatever the day demanded. It was during one of these early mornings that I realized something profound. My life no longer revolved around her absence. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the image of her in her high-rise mansion, they were memories now, sharp but distant. They existed, but they no longer defined me. I had something she could never touch: purpose, skill, and an unshakable confidence forged in fire. The faint smell of oil and wood was comforting in a way that her perfume never could be. That day, as I was sanding the legs of a custom dining table, my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on a rag and checked the screen. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. "Marcus Taylor?" a voice asked. It was calm, professional, but carried an undeniable weight. "Yes," I replied, curious. "This is Rebecca Lang. I'm the curator for the Downtown Arts Gala. We've been following your work. We'd like to feature your furniture as part of the centerpiece exhibit." I froze for a moment, the sander whirring in my hand. My chest tightened with a combination of disbelief and exhilaration. A gallery? An exhibition? I had never imagined my work on display like that, in a space where thousands would see it, not just as functional pieces, but as art. I'd be honored, I said, my voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. Weeks of preparation followed. Each piece I selected for the exhibit had to be perfect. I spent hours in the garage, choosing the best cuts of wood, refining the polish on every surface, ensuring that every edge, curve, and joint reflected not just skill, but passion. My assistants worked tirelessly alongside me, helping to move massive slabs, applying final coats of varnish, and ensuring every detail met my exacting standards. The day of the gala arrived, and the air in the city was electric. The faint scent of rain lingered from an earlier drizzle, mingling with the aroma of polished wood and varnish that I had carried into the gallery. I stood back and looked at the display. Chairs with gracefully curved legs, tables that seemed to defy gravity, and accent pieces that spoke of meticulous craftsmanship and dedication. Every surface gleamed under the gallery lights, every grain of wood telling a story of resilience and determination. And then I saw them. Her and him. They had come, presumably, to see the work that had risen from what she had left behind. She looked the same, polished and confident, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a mixture of shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like regret. He looked uncomfortable, out of place in the gallery, unsure of how to react. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. I walked through the exhibit, letting the pieces speak for themselves. People stopped me, asked questions, complimented the work, and I answered with calm, precise confidence. Every smile, every nod of appreciation, every photograph taken was a quiet testament to the life I had built on my own terms. And I could feel them watching, realizing that the man they had underestimated had transformed into someone undeniable. Later that evening, after the gala, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The faint scent of rain lingered, mixing with the warmth of the city lights. She approached me, this time without the usual armor of arrogance. "You've changed everything," she said softly, almost reverently. All of this, I didn't know you had it in you." I looked at her, the hum of the city around us, the faint scent of wet asphalt rising from the streets, and I felt nothing but clarity. "It wasn't for you," I said simply. "It was for me. I built this life, these pieces, my purpose, because I had to, not because I wanted your approval." She nodded slowly, finally understanding, and maybe for the first time realizing that leaving me had not broken me. I felt no anger, no need for revenge, only a quiet, deep satisfaction. My success, my work, and the life I had built spoke louder than any words could. Walking away from her that night, the smell of varnish still lingering faintly on my hands, I realized the final truth. I was free. Free from her, free from doubt, free from the need for validation. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and emerged stronger, taller, and more alive than I had ever imagined possible. And in that freedom, I felt unstoppable. By the time the hotel project was nearing completion, I had fallen into a rhythm that was both exhausting and exhilarating. Each morning began before sunrise. I'd step into the garage, the faint chill of dawn lingering in the air, the smell of sawdust and varnish thick and comforting. My hands were rough and calloused now, every line and scar a reminder of the hours I'd poured into building something that mattered. Sweat often ran down my back as I worked, mixing with the tang of wood and oil, leaving me sticky and gritty. But I welcomed it. Each drop of effort was a declaration of who I had become. The hotel project had grown into more than a job. It was a symbol. Each table, chair, and custom shelving unit carried the weight of every setback I had ever endured. Every night I'd lie in bed, muscles aching, lungs still tasting faintly of sawdust, and I'd think about how far I had come. I no longer imagined her in her mansion with him. Their wealth, their comfort, it didn't matter. I had something far more valuable. A life built with my own hands, my own vision, and my own determination. It was during one of these long, late nights that the call came. My phone buzzed sharply, cutting through the hum of the sander I had left running. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Marcus Taylor?" the voice asked, calm but authoritative. "Yes," I said, wary. "This is Charles Donovan, CEO of Donovan Hospitality Group. We've seen your work at the gallery and in the hotel project. I want to meet. We have a nationwide chain of hotels, and I want your furniture in every location." I felt my chest tighten. The opportunity was staggering, more than I had dreamed possible. The gravity of it, the sheer scale, made my hands tremble slightly. I took a deep breath, letting the smell of varnish and wood fill me, grounding me. I'd be honored," I said, voice steady, though my pulse was racing. The meeting with Donovan was intense. His office smelled faintly of polished mahogany and rich coffee, a sharp contrast to my garage, which reeked of sawdust and oil. He circled my work, inspecting each photo, each sample piece, his sharp eyes noting every detail. He asked pointed questions about materials, durability, and design philosophy. I answered each without hesitation, speaking from experience, from countless hours of trial and error, and from the vision that had carried me through heartbreak and betrayal. By the end of the meeting, he shook my hand firmly, a rare smile breaking across his face. "Marcus, I think you're going to change the way people see furniture across this country." Walking out of that office, the scent of polished wood and strong coffee still lingering in my senses, I realized how far I had come. The man she left behind, the one she thought she could discard for money, had not only survived, he had thrived, and on a scale she could never touch. That night, back in my garage, I worked until my arms ached and my vision blurred. The hum of the sander was my only companion, the faint scent of varnish thick in the air. I ran my hands over a finished table, the smoothness under my fingers a tactile proof of everything I had achieved. I thought about her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt no bitterness. The truth was clear. Her choices had nothing to do with my success. I had created this life, this recognition, this momentum, with my own hands and my own determination. A few days later, I received another unexpected visit. I was outside, delivering a custom dining set to a client, when I heard the familiar sound of her heels clicking against the driveway. I turned, and there she was, standing under the shade of a tree, the late afternoon sun highlighting the damp strands of hair around her face. She looked different this time, not the confident, polished woman who had left me, but vulnerable, almost hesitant. I heard about Donovan," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "That's huge. Really huge. I didn't think I'd succeed?" I interrupted gently, brushing sawdust from my hands onto the ground. She nodded slightly, eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite name. Regret, recognition, admiration. I didn't need to know. I only needed to feel what I already knew, that her expectations, her judgments, had no power over the life I had built. "It's not about proving anything to anyone," I said calmly, taking a step closer. "I did this for me. Every project, every late night, every scar on my hands, it's mine, and that's enough." She didn't respond. She just watched as I loaded the last chair into the truck, the smell of varnish and wet asphalt mingling in the air, the faint hum of the city around us. For a moment she looked like she wanted to say more, but nothing came out. And then, quietly, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, hands still rough, heart steady, fully aware that nothing she could say or do would change the life I had created. Driving home that evening, rain starting to drizzle lightly, the smell of wet asphalt and varnish filling the cab, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the nights of loneliness, they were all gone, replaced with clarity, strength, and an unstoppable momentum. I had built something that mattered, something undeniable, and no one, not her, not him, not anyone, could ever take it away. As I pulled into the driveway, the soft hum of the streetlights overhead mixing with the faint creak of the garage door, I realized the final truth. I was free. Free from the past, free from doubt, free from the need for validation. And in that freedom, I felt a power deeper than any success, deeper than any recognition, deeper than any wealth could ever provide. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, and emerged not just unbroken, but unstoppable. By the time autumn rolled in, my life had become a well-oiled machine of creation, recognition, and quiet satisfaction. The hotel project was nearing completion, and Donovan Hospitality had already started placing orders for multiple locations. My days were long, filled with the hum of sanders, the rhythmic tap of hammers, and the faint tang of varnish that seemed permanently etched into my skin. Each morning I woke before the sun, coffee in hand, inhaling the familiar mix of sawdust, oil, and fresh wood that had become the scent of my independence. It was in these quiet hours that I truly understood how far I had come. I no longer thought of her as the source of my heartbreak. Her choices were irrelevant. She had left, and in doing so, she had unknowingly freed me to pursue something far greater than I could have imagined. Every table I sanded, every chair I assembled, every piece of furniture I polished was a testament not to what I had lost, but to what I had built with my own hands and my own vision. The physical exertion, the smell of varnish and sawdust, the faint creak of freshly polished joints. It all reminded me that I was alive, thriving, unstoppable. One crisp afternoon, as the golden sunlight streamed through the high windows of my garage, I received a message from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it. It was an invitation to speak at a national design conference, a gathering of some of the most influential figures in the furniture and interior design world. My pulse quickened as I read the words. To be recognized on a national stage, not just for craftsmanship, but for vision and resilience, was an opportunity I hadn't dared to imagine months ago. I spent the following weeks preparing, not just mentally, but physically. I polished pieces that would be on display, carefully selecting materials and finishes that would reflect both skill and artistry. The scent of fresh wood, varnish, and the lingering tang of sawdust filled the air as I worked late into the nights. The rhythmic hum of the sanders, my only companion. Each piece was not just furniture. It was a story, a declaration of everything I had endured, survived, and ultimately transformed into something remarkable. The day of the conference arrived, and I found myself standing backstage, the faint smell of polished wood from the display pieces mixing with the sharp scent of antiseptic from the venue. The hum of conversation, the clicking of cameras, and the low murmur of anticipation created a strange, electric tension in the air. I took a deep breath, running my fingers along the smooth surface of the chair I had brought with me, feeling the craftsmanship under my fingertips, grounding myself in the reality that this moment was mine. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage, the warm lights hitting my face, the expectant gaze of hundreds of attendees fixed on me. For a brief moment, I felt the old sting of insecurity, of being underestimated, overlooked, but it passed instantly. I had faced far greater challenges, and nothing in this room could shake the foundation I had built with my own hands. I started in a garage, I began, my voice steady, resonant, carrying across the room. A small space, a few tools, and a vision. I faced doubt, betrayal, and countless nights where giving up seemed easier than pressing forward. But I didn't quit. I built something meaningful, piece by piece, night by night. Not for anyone else, not to prove anyone wrong, but for me. The audience was silent, absorbed, and I could feel the weight of my words settling into the room like the rich scent of wood shavings in a workshop. People nodded, some leaned forward, and I noticed the flash of cameras as photographers captured the moment. Then I saw her, not just her, but him, standing awkwardly near the back, trying to appear casual. Their expressions were unmistakable. Shock, recognition, and a dawning realization that the man they had underestimated had transformed into someone unassailable. I didn't need to look at them again. My work, my voice, and the quiet confidence in my stance spoke louder than anything I could say to them directly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about mastery over my own life. Every ounce of heartbreak, every sleepless night, every doubt had been transformed into something tangible, respected, and undeniably mine. After the speech, people approached me, shaking my hand, asking questions, admiring the pieces I had brought, praising both their design and the story behind them. The hum of the crowd, the faint aroma of varnish lingering on the furniture, the weight of recognition. It was intoxicating, but not for vanity. It was proof that perseverance, skill, and integrity could create something larger than heartbreak, something that no betrayal could ever diminish. Later, outside in the cool evening air, the faint scent of wet asphalt from a passing drizzle mixing with the lingering tang of polished wood, I saw her again. She didn't speak this time. She simply watched from across the street, her posture slightly slumped, her eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and disbelief. I could feel no need for confrontation, no need for her validation. The life I had built, the recognition I had earned, and the legacy I was creating were proof enough. Walking back to my hotel room that night, the city lights casting long reflections on wet streets, I felt a clarity I had never known. Heartbreak had shaped me, betrayal had honed me, and doubt had fueled me. I was free, not just from her, but from the weight of needing approval from anyone. I had created a life, a name, and a body of work that was mine alone, and that freedom was worth more than any wealth, any relationship, or any fleeting acknowledgement. As I lay in bed, the faint scent of varnish still clinging to my clothes, I realized that I had reached a point I had only dreamed of months ago. I was unstoppable. The man she left behind had not only survived, he had thrived, he had conquered, and he had done it on his own terms. And in that truth, I finally found peace. Not loud, not flashy, but quiet, unshakable, and absolute. I had built my life, my success, my freedom, and no one, not her, not him, not anyone, could ever take it away. By the time winter began creeping into the city, I had settled into a rhythm that felt both relentless and deeply satisfying. The hotel project was nearly complete. Donovan Hospitality had placed multiple nationwide orders, and my work had started to attract attention from publications, galleries, and design critics. My garage, once a small, chaotic corner of my home, had transformed into a fully operational workshop, filled with the hum of sanders, the tap of hammers, and the constant, comforting scent of sawdust and varnish. The faint chill in the air outside only sharpened my senses inside, making the warmth of the garage, the glow of overhead lights reflecting off polished wood, feel even more like home. I woke before sunrise most days, coffee in hand, inhaling the mingling aromas of fresh wood, sawdust, and oil. The mornings were my sanctuary, the only time when the world was quiet, the tools silent for just a moment, and I could plan, reflect, and prepare for the work ahead. I would stand over a slab of mahogany or oak, running my hands across its grain, feeling every imperfection, every knot, knowing that when I was done, it would tell a story, not just of craftsmanship, but of resilience, determination, and triumph. One afternoon, I was meticulously finishing a set of bar stools for a boutique hotel in Boston, when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. "Marcus Taylor?" the voice asked, smooth, professional, but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Yes," I replied. "This is Vanessa Chambers," she said. "I'm an editor at Modern Design magazine. We've been following your work, and we'd like to feature your story and your furniture in our upcoming national issue." For a moment I just breathed, letting the words sink in. Modern Design magazine was a major platform, a national stage that could catapult not just my work, but my reputation into an entirely new echelon. I ran a hand over the polished surface of the stool I was working on, feeling the smooth grain beneath my fingers, the faint scent of varnish grounding me before answering. "I'd be honored," The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I selected pieces that would represent not just my skill, but my journey, the hours of late nights, the smell of sawdust, the calluses on my hands, the relentless pursuit of excellence born out of heartbreak. Each piece I polished until it gleamed under the gallery lights I imagined, each joint aligned perfectly, each surface a testament to precision and care. My assistants worked tirelessly, moving heavy slabs of wood, applying final coats, and helping me prepare the narrative I would share alongside my work. The day the magazine came out, I held the glossy copy in my hands, the faint scent of print ink mingling with the lingering tang of varnish on my clothes. I flipped through the pages, reading the article that chronicled my journey, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the garage that had become a sanctuary, and the success that had followed. Her face, imagined or real, flickered in my mind for a brief second, and I realized something powerful. She had no claim on this life. I had built it, earned it, and no one could ever take it from me. A few days later, I was delivering furniture to a new client when I spotted her again. She stood at the edge of the street, partially hidden by the shadows of the trees lining the sidewalk. He was with her, looking slightly out of place, a tension in his posture that hadn't been there the first time I saw them. She approached cautiously, the faint scent of her perfume trailing in the chilly winter air. I read the article," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach me over the sound of my truck engine idling. "Your work, it's incredible." I didn't interrupt. I simply wiped my hands on a rag and glanced at her, calm, composed, unshakable. The anger that had once burned in me was gone, replaced with quiet satisfaction. She had left, thinking she had taken everything, and instead, I had transformed that loss into something tangible, something enduring. "I appreciate it," I said finally, my voice steady. "But this isn't about recognition. It's about doing something meaningful, something I can be proud of, and that's enough." Her eyes lingered on me for a long moment, filled with a mix of curiosity, admiration, and maybe even regret. She didn't speak again. She simply turned and walked away, leaving me in the cold winter air, the smell of wet asphalt mixing with the faint tang of varnish still clinging to my hands. I felt no need to call after her, no desire to prove myself further. I had already proven everything that mattered, to myself. The rest of the day passed in a blur of deliveries and installations. The faint smell of polished wood filled every space I entered, the rhythmic creak of joints, and the soft tap of tools providing a soundtrack to my success. I realized then that this life, the freedom, the purpose, the quiet mastery over my own destiny, was something she could never take, no matter how close she tried to get. That night, I returned to my garage, the soft glow of overhead lights reflecting off finished pieces, the faint scent of varnish and sawdust mingling with the winter air seeping through the windows. I ran my hands over a newly completed dining set, feeling the smooth surfaces, the perfectly aligned joints, the result of months of meticulous work. I realized I had built more than furniture. I had built proof that a man could rise from betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, and emerge stronger, more skilled, and more alive than ever. As I stepped outside, the crisp winter air sharp against my skin, I looked up at the clear night sky, stars scattered like distant promises. I breathed in deeply, the scent of cold earth mixing with the faint tang of varnish on my clothes. For the first time, I felt completely free. Free from the past, free from regret, free from the weight of needing approval. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and I had emerged not just unbroken, but unstoppable. And in that freedom, in the quiet hum of my workshop, and the smell of sawdust and varnish lingering in the air, I finally understood the truth I had been chasing all along. The life I had built, the success I had earned, and the legacy I was creating. These were mine, and no one could ever take them away. Winter had settled fully over the city, wrapping the streets in gray skies, the faint smell of wet asphalt, and the chill that seeped through every crack in buildings and garages. But inside mine, the garage smelled of sawdust, varnish, and determination, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the freezing wind outside. By now, my work had gained a reputation far beyond the city limits. Donovan Hospitality had expanded orders. The modern design feature was drawing nationwide attention, and every day brought a new client eager for something unique, something that carried the story of resilience and mastery in every grain of wood. I had grown comfortable in this rhythm, waking before dawn, coffee in hand, inhaling the familiar mix of sawdust, oil, and varnish. The early morning light filtered through the high garage windows, highlighting the rich textures of mahogany, oak, and walnut as I worked. My hands were rough and calloused, my back a little stiff, but I felt more alive than ever. Each cut, each polish, each precisely aligned joint wasn't just work. It was a declaration of survival, of transformation, of life reclaimed from heartbreak. It was during one of these early mornings, the air crisp and the faint tang of wet asphalt lingering outside, that I received an unexpected message. A client from Los Angeles wanted an entire furniture collection shipped for a new hotel. The sheer scale of the request made my heart race. I leaned against the workbench, inhaling the comforting mix of sawdust and varnish, letting the reality sink in. My work was now traveling across the country, representing the life I had built, the story I had forged, and the resilience I carried like armor. Preparation for the order became all-consuming. Every piece had to be flawless. My assistants and I worked late nights, moving heavy slabs, sanding until our hands burned, applying layers of varnish that gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. The garage smelled of wood, polish, and effort, a heady mix that I had come to associate with victory. I felt the hum of the sanders in my chest, as if the rhythm of labor was synchronizing with my heartbeat. Amid all this, I began noticing something subtle in my own reflection. The man who stared back at me in the mirror each morning had changed. His jawline was firmer, his shoulders broader, his eyes carrying a depth of calm confidence that had been absent months ago. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need recognition. But somehow, seeing myself like this felt like the final confirmation. I had survived, I had risen, and I had become someone I respected. It was on a particularly cold afternoon, when the wind rattled the windows and the faint smell of rain mixed with asphalt, that I saw her again. She had appeared without warning, standing across the street, trying to shield herself from the drizzle with a small umbrella. He was with her, as always, looking out of place among the modest homes of my neighborhood. Their presence wasn't a shock anymore, but it drew my attention all the same. She watched as I carried a finished mahogany table into the truck for shipment. Her eyes were wide, reflecting surprise, recognition, and something that looked like awe. But I didn't approach, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond a nod. She had come to see if I had fallen apart, but all she witnessed was a man thriving, a man fully in control of his life and his destiny. I felt a strange satisfaction, not born of spite, but from the calm awareness that her judgments had no power over me. Marcus, she called softly, the drizzle muffling her words. I didn't know. I shook my head slightly, smiling, the cold air biting at my cheeks, the scent of wet wood and varnish mingling with the winter air. This isn't about you, I said. I built this life, this work, this purpose for me. That's all that matters. Her lips parted as if she wanted to respond, but no words came. She lingered for a moment, then turned and walked back down the street, her footsteps soft against the wet pavement. I watched her go, feeling nothing but a quiet sense of triumph. The life I had built, the recognition I had earned, and the legacy I was creating were mine, and hers had nothing to do with it. That evening, the garage quiet except for the faint hum of a heater and the residual warmth from hours of labor, I stepped back to look at the pieces ready for shipment. Tables gleamed, chairs reflected the soft light, and the collection as a whole told a story. One of heartbreak transformed into skill, betrayal transformed into focus, and doubt transformed into resilience. I ran my hands over the smooth surfaces, inhaling the familiar scent of varnish, and realized that this was more than furniture. It was proof of survival, of mastery, of the power of creating a life that no one could take away. Sitting on a stool I had built myself, I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. Outside, the city was quiet, the drizzle falling softly, The scent of wet asphalt, heavy in the night air. Inside, the garage was warm, filled with the smells and sounds of creation. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel fully, completely and without reservation. Proud, free, unstoppable. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and doubt, and emerged not just intact, but stronger, more capable, and fully alive. And in that quiet winter night, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my persistence, I understood the ultimate truth. No one, not her, not him, not anyone, could ever diminish the life I had built. It was mine, absolute, undeniable, and eternal. Spring was beginning to edge its way into the city, softening the harsh lines of winter with the faint scent of wet earth, budding trees, and fresh grass. My garage, however, remained a sanctuary of focus, filled with the comforting aromas of sawdust, varnish, and polished wood. I had grown almost symbiotic with this place. The hum of the sanders, the rhythmic tap of hammers, the faint squeak of clamps. They were all part of the heartbeat of my life now. Every morning I woke before sunrise, coffee in hand, inhaling the mingling scents of oil, varnish, and wood, and I felt the quiet power of a man who had not only survived, but had thrived beyond anyone's expectations. The Donovan Hospitality Project was finally wrapping up, the final pieces being carefully polished, labeled, and prepared for shipment. Orders had doubled, and now I was dealing with national clients who had heard of my work through magazines, exhibitions, and word of mouth. Each call, each meeting, each delivery reinforced a truth I had grown to cherish. I was no longer defined by her, by the man she had left me for, or by anyone else's perception of my worth. My life, my work, my recognition, it all belonged to me, and that sense of ownership was intoxicating in its quiet power. One particularly warm morning, as sunlight streamed through the high windows of the garage and dust motes danced like tiny golden particles in the air, my phone buzzed with a new message. I opened it to find a request from a client in New York, a high-end boutique hotel chain that wanted an entire furniture collection designed and shipped across the country. The scope was staggering, but I felt a familiar surge of exhilaration rather than fear. I leaned against a polished workbench, inhaling the scent of varnish and sawdust, letting it anchor me as I imagined the scale of the project. This was beyond anything I had ever dreamed of, and yet it felt natural, inevitable, like the logical next step of the life I had painstakingly built. Preparation consumed me. I meticulously selected wood, polished every surface until it gleamed under the harsh workshop lights, and oversaw every detail with my assistants. My hands were rough and calloused, the faint scent of varnish clinging to my skin, and the rhythm of my labor, the hum of sanders, the tap of hammers, the scrape of planes against timber, became a meditation. Every piece I created told the story of my transformation, each polished curve and seamless joint a declaration that heartbreak and betrayal could be alchemized into mastery and beauty. It was during this frenzy of creation that she appeared again. She had a quiet way of showing up, never announced, always observing from the edges. I was outside delivering a set of custom dining chairs to a client when I noticed her standing across the street, subtle but unmistakable, her eyes scanning the work with curiosity and, I could tell, admiration. He was with her, awkward and slightly tense, as if realizing for the first time that she might not have the upper hand in this story. She called out softly, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of my truck engine. "Marcus, I saw the feature in Modern Design. Your work, it's incredible. I didn't know you had..." I wiped my hands on a rag, inhaling the mix of varnish and the faint scent of wet asphalt from the morning drizzle. Calm, steady, unshakable, I looked her in the eye. "I built this life, these pieces, this purpose for me. That's all that matters." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she lingered, her eyes tracing the lines of the furniture, the smooth surfaces, the subtle attention to detail. For a long moment, she seemed to realize that the man she had underestimated had grown far beyond the constraints of her perception. She had left thinking she had power over me, but the truth was stark and undeniable. I had created a life she could never touch, a life that thrived on skill, effort, and vision. Finally, she turned and walked away, her footsteps soft on the wet pavement. I watched her go, feeling only a quiet satisfaction. There was no anger, no desire for confrontation. The life I had built, the recognition I had earned, and the legacy I was shaping were mine and mine alone. Her presence, her choices, her judgments, they held no sway here. Back in the garage, the faint hum of a heater mixing with the residual warmth of hours of labor, I surveyed the pieces I had prepared for shipment. Tables gleamed, chairs reflected the soft morning light, and every joint, every curve, every polished surface was a testament to transformation. I ran my hands over the wood, inhaling the familiar scents of varnish and sawdust, and felt a profound clarity. This was more than furniture. It was proof that heartbreak could be transformed into skill, betrayal into focus, and doubt into unshakable resilience. Sitting on a stool I had crafted myself, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. Outside, spring was creeping over the city, the faint scent of fresh grass and wet earth carried on the breeze. Inside, the garage smelled of varnish, sawdust, and quiet accomplishment. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, and for the first time in months, I felt completely free, not just from her, but from any lingering need for validation, for approval, or for recognition from anyone. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, and I had emerged not only unbroken, but unstoppable. And in that quiet spring morning, surrounded by the tangible proof of my efforts and resilience, I understood the ultimate truth. The life I had built, the work I had crafted, and the legacy I was shaping, these were mine. Absolute, undeniable, eternal. By mid-spring, I was unstoppable. Orders came from all over the country, clients seeking the life and story I poured into every piece of furniture. The garage smelled of sawdust, varnish, and determination, the hum of the sanders my constant companion. One morning, as I was applying a final coat of stain to a custom dining table, I heard the familiar sound of heels clicking against the driveway. I glanced up. She was standing there alone this time, eyes wide, unguarded, uncertain. Marcus, she said softly. You've really done it. I cut her off gently. It wasn't for you, I said. It was for me. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came. She turned and walked away. I inhaled deeply, the scent of varnish and sawdust filling my lungs. For the first time, I realized she didn't matter anymore. The life I had built, the recognition I had earned, the freedom I had claimed, it was mine. Absolute, undeniable. I smiled, picking up my sander and returning to work. The hum of the tool was music, the smell of sawdust, a perfume. I was unstoppable. Summer arrived, and with it, a sense of quiet triumph. The hotel project was complete. Nationwide orders were flowing in, and my name had become synonymous with skill, resilience, and vision. My garage still smelled of sawdust and varnish, but now it carried something else too, the scent of victory, of a life fully reclaimed. I walked through the workshop one evening, hands rough, muscles sore, the faint hum of the sanders like a heartbeat. Each piece gleamed under the soft light, a testament to nights of sweat, determination, and relentless focus. This was more than work. It was proof that heartbreak could be transformed into mastery. And then I realized it. I was free. Free from her, from him, from the past. Free from doubt, fear, and the weight of needing anyone's validation. I had faced betrayal, loneliness, and despair. And I had emerged stronger, unstoppable, fully alive. I stepped outside, the warm summer breeze carrying the faint scent of asphalt and blossoming trees. I breathed deeply, savoring the quiet power in my chest. No one could take this life from me. I had built it. I had earned it. I had claimed it. And in that moment I smiled, not for revenge, not for recognition, but for myself. The man she left behind was gone. The man I had become was unstoppable, and the world, finally, had no choice but to watch.